Gentlelady
Thank you
from
very much.
Michigan, Ms. Dingell is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Elmendorf, I know you just have to enjoy being with all of us.
Actually, I do, Congresswoman.
Questions. But it is an honor to be here with you. I would not call this light bedtime reading last night. I wish I'd gone to bed at the beginning of the report when things looked rosy and didn't look down the road. And I love listening to my colleague.
Most people go to bed during the reading the report, Congresswoman.
I stayed awake, unfortunately, and then I didn't sleep because we've got to figure it out, and we've got a lot of tough issues that we really do talk about. Reality isn't going to go away, and I hope we can have some good bipartisan discussions on how we address them. I really would like to talk about the middle class, but since my colleague left off at the debt limit, I would like to ask one question, which would be, what would you think the repercussions would be if the federal government were to default on its loan? And when do you think we're going to have to look at raising the debt ceiling again?
So under current law, the debt ceiling suspension ends in the middle of March, and at that point the debt ceiling will be set equal to what it was before the suspension plus any debt issued in the meantime, which is to say that we will immediately be up against the debt limit in the middle of March. Unless the law is changed, and again, unless there's something else happens, we think that Treasury will run out of its standard, quote, extraordinary measures by September or October, and shortly after that would run out of cash and would not be able to make all of its, meet all of its obligations on a timely basis. The consequences of that to our economy and financial system and to the global economy and financial system could be quite severe, and we have no way of quantifying exactly because we've never let that happen before in this country.
And you would not recommend that we do, correct?
It is a very, very risky, dangerous strategy, Congresswoman.
So we were discussing the middle class, and people have talked about the observations you've made about the 58 consecutive months of private sector job growth with 11 million jobs being added. I'm concerned that that doesn't totally tell us the whole story because the ordinary workers aren't feeling it. You talked a few minutes ago about one of the reasons that we were seeing decreased revenue was corporations, one that we're seeing more jobs shipped overseas, but also, and I don't happen to think that this is a bad thing, that we're going to start to see increased labor costs. I think too many workers have seen their wages have been stagnant over the last 5 years. In fact, I think the real median family income has declined about $5,000. And one recent study showed that from 2009 to 2012, the top 1% salary grew faster than the incomes of the bottom 99%, except for in West Virginia and in many states, including mine of Michigan, the 99% income decreased, didn't increase. So my question to you is that would focus on creating new middle-class jobs increase revenues and increase the deficit?
Well, so Congresswoman, on the numbers you cite about incomes, we issue a report ourselves every year on the distribution of household income and federal taxes. The latest report we have actually goes through 2011. We operate with some lag because we wait for the detailed tax data to be available. The precise numbers for shares of income and for income growth in different parts of the distribution do depend on a number of technical features, but I think every data source that I'm aware of shows much greater income growth at the top of the distribution than further down the distribution. If more middle-class jobs could be created, the effects on the budget, I think, would really depend on the mechanism through which they were created and the budgetary cost of that, and also what those people would have been doing otherwise. So if those people would have otherwise been in lower-paying jobs, then giving them higher-paying jobs in which they are more productive, and thus they earn higher wages, that all else equal would be good for GDP, and it would be good for the federal budget. But it does depend on if there are federal policies you have in mind. Of course, the net effect would depend on the cost of those policies.
Well, let me ask you this question. It would seem to me that making smart, targeted investments in education, infrastructure, and research and development, as my colleagues have talked about, would be a good thing. Do you have recommendations on how the federal government should invest to create more middle-class jobs and increase revenue?
So we don't make recommendations. We have looked at different reports on a number of different approaches that the Congress could take, including federal investments. And when we model the macroeconomic effects of changes in fiscal policies, one of the channels that we capture is the effects of changes in federal investments, in physical infrastructure, in education and training, and in research and development. So we think those kinds of investments do pay a return that will turn up in GDP and in people's wages and ultimately in federal revenues.
Gentlelady's time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman